So I did research on the effects of children with violence in their home and environment. Going into my thesis and research, the average age for a child is around 3 to 5 years old for the highest rate of exposure to violence in their home environment. This could be due to parents resolving a divorce or in the middle of a separation, the spouse being verbally, physically, or emotionally abusive towards their spouse or towards their child. This amount of stress can cause physical burdens as well as health burdens. Going into psychological impairment. Into psychological impairment, children inherit genotypes, which is gene-based characteristics from parents, as well as negative environments that parents raise in themselves, and parents being born or developing mental disorders or neuropsychological dysfunctions. All three of these considerations can cause a child to have a high risk of developing depression, anxiety, and DID, which is dissociative identity disorder. A great example of this is going into an experiment. Lieberman did an experiment in trauma in early childhood with empirical evidence and clinical implications. Lieberman wanted to see where the majority of children were raised in violent homes and where they came from. She found that children aged birth to 5 years old were raised and represented 36% of those entering foster care. Some of them being raised in lower poverty or were lower class and living in lower house conditions such as probably no air conditioner, heater, or no food. She found that from this, children have high rates of developing mental disorders and long-term issues as they grow older. Moving into health impairments. With health impairments, when the body goes under a certain amount of stress, the immune response is weakened. If the inflammatory response is overproduced and is chronic, which is happening over and over again, it may therefore lead to cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and dementia. A great example of this is into another experiment. Terry E. Moffitt researched more into the exposure to violence in lifelong health. She had perspective more of science and biology research to it. She researched more into stress biology. Basically, she looked into how the child's mind and body can handle the stress physically. Her main research question was what biological and psychological alterations to the brain and body can account for the long-term connection between a stressful childhood and ill health that only emerges 40 to 70 years later. She noticed that all these implications occurred years after the child went through trauma. She wanted to see that the two types of biological systems, the hypothalamic pituitary endocrinal and axis in the inflammatory system. She saw that both of these systems weaken the immune system, which therefore cause brain damage and damaged tissue. And from there, it becomes chronic and cannot heal itself. Going into treatment, pros and cons. Some treatments of pros and cons. The pros are treatments has progressed and has been more successful in the last 15 years. Some treatments include psychoeducation on trauma and how to cope with it better parenting skills, and relaxation meditations can go for both parent and child. Some cons, unfortunately, is that when therapy is taking place, about 42% of families drop out, and there are known reasons why they do. And in surveys of patients 4 months after their treatment, about 32% develop symptoms, again, of their disorder. And moving on to the conclusion. In the end, when children are merging into adults, they have a harder time adjusting psychologically. Instead, they are becoming more susceptible to mental and cognitive disorders. With treatments today, we can delay this progress and have a healthier generation. By doing so, learning simple parenting skills can have a greater impact in the end. And as well as if we implement treatment early on, we can prevent untreatable mental disorders on the child as they become older.